Welcome guys, the first of my tutorial videos for Blood Bowl Chaos Edition. So this is me trying to help you guys understand the game, tactics, all that stuff, how it works. These are going to be a set of videos, so it's not going to be something that's going to be just one video and we'll cover it all. It'll be quite gradual, small, short videos, so that we can go from the very basics to the advanced much later on, but at the moment we have to start at the basics, and that brings us to the first episode, which is the Blood Bowl Introductory episode. It's where we explain what Blood Bowl is and generally the aim of the game. So we'll start off with Blood Bowl is a fantasy American football game, so very much played on a pitch with 11 players on either side, but and an important aspect is the races. So if we just go have a look here, in fact actually no, we can just go through customize player viewer, we have a large choice of races varying from the Amazons to the Halflings to Undead, and there's about 23 in Chaos Edition, 20 in Legendary Edition. So that's not the Undead, that's ogre, but ogres. So it's quite varied, and each race has a different approach to the game. Some will start with a base core skills, such as the Amazons, who start with a dodge skill, which keeps them out of harm, and others will be just pure builds that wait till they do skill up, and they also have different stats and different sort of stereotypical ways to play. For example, Chaos is quite a bashy team, as you could probably tell if I showed you their guys. They look like quite heavily armoured. They're heavily armoured, they know what they're doing. But if we take, for example, Wood Elves, these guys, they're a lot lighter. They're a lot more agile. So they're in there to play ball play rather than violence. And violence is definitely one way to play Blood Bowl. And my is there a lot of violence. The Blood Bowl pitch is made up of a grid of 15 by 24 squares. Each player is able to take up a single square. This means that you can move and deploy your players in different sort of formations, and generally it also adds to the game, and it'll all become a little bit clearer, but the main thing is that you realise there is a grid. The game of Blood Bowl requires the use of dice, basically for any action that isn't just moving. So dodging, etc., picking up the ball. This is a block, which requires slightly different dice in the sense they're not labelled 1 to 6, but the dice can correspond to different... The faces on these dice correspond to a number. So this arrow is a 3 to 4, this is a 1, and this is a 5. I'll explain that in another episode when I do blocking, but that's all you need to know about blocking dice for now. And just like with blocks, if you're required to make ball plays, it often takes a number of dice as well for that. So for example here I'm going to have to pick up on a 2+, so dice is rolled, and you can see the rolls that are made down on the bottom here. So we'll first of all try and pick it up, and he does pick it up, and you can see here it was a agility 3+, but because it's a plus, he gets a modifier +1 for a pickup. But I'll explain all about how you work these out individually when we discuss these skills. But just for example, here's me going to make a throw as well. I'll do it long range to show something else. He gets perfect launch and basically makes the pass, which was a 4+ followed by a 2+. The game of Blood Bowl is one played in turns. Each team has a go at making their moves, and they can use all available players. However, they can only do certain actions in a single turn, a number of certain actions in a single turn, which means they can only make one handoff of the ball, which I'll explain again, handoffs and passes in another episode. They can only make one blitz, which is a move and block rather than just a block, and they can only move a player once, and once that player has been decided on his movement position, and you move another player, or take an action with another player, you cannot go back to your previous one, even if he had movement allowed or could have done something. And very simply, if I end the turn, it turns back onto my opponent, or rather me at this current point, my turn. The only thing that can happen, and
you have to be careful, is turnovers is where your turn ends prematurely. So you failed an action which basically causes your turn to screw up or not succeed, and you will suffer therefore the consequences, which is the end of your turn when you really don't want it. So let's see if we can get ourselves to suffer a turnover. It should be quite easy. All I need to do is well, there's a number of ways you can concede a turnover. One is by failing a simple action. So for example here, if I'd failed that dodge. Another is by failing a block. Here we'll try and go uphill block against this guy. Let's see what he can do. Right, so this would be a turnover. As I have not succeeded on the block, and he has in fact knocked me down. By succeeded I mean that I have not won that combat. And once again, it switches turns, and it gives me the opportunity, or my opponent, or your opponent, the opportunity to make his moves and do whatever he wants to do. So it's quite simple, the turn-based system. And there's 8 turns and a half in a standard game, and there's 16 turns in total usually in your standard game. These can change, but rarely will you see a game that's any different to that. The turn times also have... the turns have limits as well on them. So for example, this is a I'm currently 3 minutes and 30 seconds left on the clock for this turn, but I have 4 minutes. That's quite traditional. I enjoy playing 2-minute turns, and you can do 40-second ones. At the end of a Blood Bowl game, there will be a scoreline, and all of it will be wound up and concluded on here. In this case, the High Seas Surf Raiders won by 2 touchdowns to nothing against Salamander's Breath, and that means they win. They scored the most touchdowns, and you can see most of your stats here, replay player statistics, and all that jazz. But that covers, I think, the simplest part of Blood Bowl. That's the very basic introduction. I'll cover more on my next episode, which is likely to be discussing drives. I think that's the best thing to do. So we'll discuss the format of the Blood Bowl game and the pattern and the sort of the way the turns play out, etc., etc., halves and all that stuff. So stay tuned for one of those episodes, and I'll try and keep them coming. The aim of the game is to score touchdowns, which are very simply that. You get the ball to the end zone of your opponent. At this point, the Wood Elves have just scored against me.